Good morning, fellas. And
Morning.
Morning.
yeah, good to see everybody. And here we are again. Days are getting shorter. Have you guys noticed that? Or maybe it's
Yes.
the smoke in the air. It could be the
Uh-huh.
smoke in the air.
Both.
Today they start to get longer.
What's that? Then they start getting longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a man of vision.
Hey, there's only 13 weeks of fall left, so
That's
God,
right.
love. Thank you,
I
Art.
think, first day of fall was yesterday, wasn't it?
First
22nd?
day of fall, yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. And we're in the Gospel of John, as you're very well aware. And I heard the jokes while I was out about creeping along here. I fully understand. But guys, I'm very grateful for you guys and your patience with me. But the reality is I get opportunity to study these chapters. I'm just enjoying this so much and seeing things that I had not seen before. And it's really fun to be able to compile that and to be able to share it with you guys. So thank you for your patience with me, and hope it must be helpful because we all keep showing up. So, well, last time we were together, we looked at the opening verses. I think it was verses chapter 6, verses 1 through 6, and just by way of review, I picked one slide as a review, and where it says Jesus lifting up his eyes and seeing that a large crowd was coming, said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these may eat?" And I put under the review there, here it comes. This is a teaching moment, a training moment for Jesus's disciples. And what we know, the background, so to get the gist of this training, this opportunity, we looked at what we know thus far from verses 1 through 6. Sickness has been healed. It says the crowd were following Jesus, the healer. It's Passover time, which I don't think we want to dismiss here. I think this is going to show up here during this study in this section. And then this context is where Jesus poses the question to Philip, and the question is stated as a test. So, good morning, Dick.
Good morning. Hi, gentlemen.
And so what's exciting to me is, what is this test about? And I gotta believe what little I know of Jesus is that it's a test for the benefit of the development of Philip as a disciple. That's kind of what my take is on it. So it's certainly not to embarrass him or see if Philip measures up. That can't be it. But it's got to be for the benefit of Philip and his discipleship. So that's what I'm imposing on the story, and we'll see if it bears out as we journey through it. Let's read the text. We're going to move on to 7 through 10 this morning, but let's read the entire chapter beginning in verse 1. Would somebody read those first 10 verses?
After these things, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, or Tiberias. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs which he was performing on those who were sick. Then Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was near. Therefore Jesus, lifting up his eyes and seeing that a large crowd was coming to him, said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these may eat?" This he was saying to test him, for he himself knew that he was in what he was intending to do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, for everyone to receive a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, But what are these for so many people? Jesus said, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in number about 5,000.
All right. Thanks, Bob. And of course, we're all familiar with the story. And boy, I'm just chuckling, grinning here, because wow, what a setup! The crowd is coming. Jesus is sitting down on the grass. That means, well, teaching moment here, and we'll dive into it. Mike Melander, I see you joined us, and welcome this morning. So anyway, picture this. A large crowd is approaching. Word is out. There has been demonstration and healing through this man of Nazareth. They call him Jesus, and there's a lot of buzz going on. A very large crowd is coming, approaching, and picture this as the rumbling of a train approaching, the sound of something big about to happen. And let's call that big demand. The demands that come to us in our lives. There's a demand which creates some sort of problem, and demand creates a level of stress. So think about, as we're reading the story, think about in your own lives, in our own lives, when demand is approaching. We all feel it different ways. We sense it different ways. The stress starts to mount. It could be a number of different ways, but we all know the feel of the crowd approaching, the demand coming our way. That's the feel as I see it. Jesus asks a where question to Philip. Where should we look? It's a sourcing question. Where do we look to meet this demand, Philip? And Philip responds with a what answer. We're talking about apples and oranges, a where question and a what response. Where do we look, Philip? And Philip says, well, 200 denarii would not be sufficient. And I understand, if you look this up on the web, there's different views, but basically my understanding is that a denarius was a one-day wage for a common laborer. And so basically 200 days worth of work, 200 man days worth of money would be needed, wouldn't even be sufficient to meet this crowd. This is a big crowd. And Philip immediately goes to what is needed to meet this demand. What is needed? In verse 8, Andrew pipes in with a second what answer to the where question. And he says, one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, here's a lad who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are these for so many people? As the 2 disciples in their discipleship stage analyze the demand approaching, one identifies the amount of dollars needed to meet this need. Andrew identifies a lack of resource. We don't have the resource, and we don't have the money to meet this demand. And those 2 are in response to the where question that Jesus asks, where do we go to buy bread? So what I've done is I've placed these, you can't, I don't know, with this virtual background, you can't see my hands, but there is a left and a right. And I did this to illustrate Jesus asks for apples and he gets oranges. There are two different frames of reference that are illustrated here. Now, I really identify with Philip and Andrew. My natural response, if I would have been there, would have been exactly the same. What is needed to Jesus? I probably wouldn't even heard his question, the where question. Where do we look? I would have immediately gone into a what answer, and maybe you as well. Left and right, the situation is the same. It's a high demand, stressful situation. Where are we going to get bread to feed these folks, this huge crowd? And that raises stress. So addressing the stress, this stressful situation, Jesus Jesus is looking to source. What is the source we should look at? The two disciples, whom I would identify with, look immediately to solution. Jesus looks to source. Philip and Andrew look to solution. Solution, money and resource. They move in their heads, they go from stress to problem solving, just like that. Just bam, bam. One step is how do we rid this stress? How do we meet this demand? Whereas Jesus is, where do we look for help? Sourcing help to meet the need. It's an intermediary. It's not a direct response. I find that fascinating. Two very different ways of thinking. So, comments. Jesus is inviting his followers into an entirely new way of processing experience. I think that this is a lesson in their developmental process as a disciple. And I think there is a lot for us to learn here in our experiential development as disciples. Think of his offering, Jesus's offering, as a new set of tools that these guys are not familiar with. The new set of tools is not designed to devalue or replace anything. In other words, he's not devaluating their current way of thinking, but rather to open up an entirely new way of seeing. Opening up an entirely new way of seeing. On this occasion, and John calls it a test, Jesus's immediate disciples, his followers, in this case illustrated by Andrew and Philip, they're being taught how to utilize these new tools when faced with a high demand and thus stressful situation. Jesus said in verse 10, have the people sit down. Here's the tool. Have the people sit down. Step one. Now, there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, and the men numbered 5,000. So the first new tool is what I'm calling quiet the demand. Quiet is a verb here. Quieting the demand, calming the demand, calming the voice. Step one, have the people sit down. In a stressful, high demand, as the train is approaching and you hear the whistle blowing and you feel the ground shaking, in whatever the stress is coming and building in your body, the first step is quiet the voice, quiet the demand. The screaming voice of need and urgency must be calmed. Otherwise, we as human beings revert to a reactionary mode to problem solve. Now again, problem solving is necessary, but it's not the first step. And I see this first demonstrated in Genesis chapter 3, going way back. I often reference this chapter because the first thing that the pair did when out of relation, when they perceived themselves out of relationship with God, remember they walked daily in the garden, is they problem solved. And again, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. Problem solving is necessary, but I also see it as a reactionary mode that is part of the human condition that we're in. The man and the woman covered themselves. They solved the problem of their perceived deficit. And I think that's a worthy question to be asking ourselves when faced why we respond the way we respond when faced with a stressful situation. To calm the screaming voice is something we must be taught and then learn to use with proficiency over time. There's not one way to do this, but whatever our way is, it involves, and I'm pretty confident on this, some sort of practice. By practice, I mean some sort of conscious, and I'm using the term rhythmic. It could be conscious and consistent, or reoccurring. But by practice, it's something conscious and it's rhythmic, meaning it's happening in a sequence with other things. Effort that we employ to center our being. Have the people sit down is the verse we're looking at. I think of this, what I'm talking about here, as a returning home. And I'm using home in the true sense of the term to describe a state. It's an inner state of safety, peacefulness, rest, and wholeness. Now, how do we do that as believers? For some, the traditional, what we call the quiet time, may or may not, depending on our approach, may serve this purpose. It's certainly a time when, we set aside, and a quiet time is traditionally with the scriptures and a reading, and we sit and listen to the voice of the Lord. And that's certainly a wonderful thing. However, this has changed for me over time. As I've grown, I used to be pretty regimented with the quiet time. That's time alone with God. Well, certainly valid. However, given our personality and the kind of people we are and the way God made us, there may be other ways to have this kind of practice. and such things as walking and running or music or dance, even gardening, or that opened up even some hobbies can facilitate the centering objective. Anything which quiets the mind, the body, and the heart can be utilized to this end. Now, that's a very broad and open comment. That's a much different place than I was when I was a younger man. But I do believe that given the multitude of personalities that we are, anything that can quiet our mind, body, and heart can be utilized to bring us to this place of calming the screaming voice. So what I'd like to do is go to table time, and let's go into our groups and talk about this. And snap. What we've been doing, Bill, is snapping. Maybe you are aware of that already, but the screen doesn't go with the breakout rooms. So snap means take a picture, unless you can remember the question. In what way can you relate to this idea of quieting the demand or calming the voice, if you will? And then what is it that quiets your mind on a very practical level? I think we'd all like to hear this. You know, what quiets your mind, your body, and your heart? What's your practice? And so let's do that. Let's go to the breakout rooms, and I'll join in with one of you. So have a good time with this, and then we'll get back together probably in about 20 minutes. So have some fun. Here you go. I'm gonna
Maybe.
hang on just a minute here. Yeah, I just changed it around a little bit. So here you go. Whoop.
First chance to work with Guy yesterday.
Yeah.
Morning, fellas.
Got it. Yep. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh,
How are you?
Bob, we got to behave ourselves. The the bosses in our group.
Yeah, that's what they all say when I join. Hopefully I'm not too intimidating. I'm going to shut the recording off here. So